Hey guys, all right, as we build this Turbo-S, we're going to kind of do this in succession. We're going to start out with all the different products that we offer here at Boondocker for an XP Turbo. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to change the charge tube and intake tube out. We're not going to change the turbo, we're not going to change anything else, we're just going to change those tubes. We'll show you in depth a little bit more when we get the stock ones out, but the stock parts are plastic and we have these nice aluminum parts. This is a good rigid tube to handle more boost, and it's a little bit higher volume to help with a little bit of performance. I don't expect to see a big horsepower difference with these, but they're definitely a nice piece. They look really good and they'll hold up to the higher boost. We also have an aftermarket BOV blow-off valve that we're going to go ahead and put on with these tubes, and then we'll go ahead and dyno that. Like I said, I don't expect to see a change, but that's the order that we're going to do it. Now, as the vehicle's stock, and once we have those tubes on them, we're going to go ahead and put a new clutch kit in it. So the clutching is really important. We have a couple of different springs, and then we have some adjustable weights. Clutching is really important because the amount of horsepower and the weight of the vehicle determines what peak RPM would be. The cool thing about a CVT, and the RZR runs a CVT, is that it comes up to peak RPM and it keeps that RPM the whole time. We want to, on a vehicle like this, we want to be about 85 or 8600 RPMs. But in stock form, this one on the street or even on the dyno is only pulling as much as 83 or 84. When we get it on the road, when we get it on the sand with some paddle tires, it's going to be down around 81 or 82. So I want to get that RPM up where it's optimal. So we'll do that change, and then we'll show you what effects that has on the dyno. After that, we're going to go ahead and go on to ECU tuning. We're going to turn the boost up a little bit. We've got PVCX. It'll turn up the boost. All the tuning is done with that. You can use it as just a device to download to the ECU and then put it away, or it actually will display boost and some other information that can be pretty useful. So right after that, we're going to bolt on a Boondocker double down muffler. This should free up our exhaust flow. Typically, it's not huge numbers on the dyno, but we'll see exactly what it does. It definitely gives it a sweet note, makes them sound a little bit better out there on the dunes. Right after that, we're going to bolt on the centerpiece. This is the smallest piece on the table, but it is the most significant. This is the Boondocker Dominator Turbo. So this turbocharger not only has a bigger billet compressor wheel and new housing with a bigger inlet, but it also has a larger AR, which is the size of the hole that introduces the exhaust gases into the turbine wheel. So this bolts up directly in place of the stock one, fits in the exact same space, but it has all bigger components for more performance. We're running this turbo above 20 pounds of boost. Stock, your RZR will run about 14.5 pounds, and you can push that stock turbo up at elevation, maybe 2 pounds more than that, but they're really pushing that stock turbo to the limit already. That's why we go to a bigger turbo, so we can get more boost. So all of these parts we're going to put on, we're going to test on pump gas. We're going to come back next week, we'll turn this up for some high octane and show you what you can really achieve if you want to put some higher octane in it. But right now what we're focused on is the maximum performance, and you can stop at the gas station and get gas. Hey, we're back guys, and I have Cody with me. Cody is the guy that gets stuff done around here. He changes parts, installs turbo kits, he's learning a ton of stuff, and he is an excellent right-hand man and a really good sidekick. No pun intended. Anyways, you just pulled this out?
I did.
Yeah? All right, so this is our stock charge tube, and it is plastic, which is plastic. So this is what we're going to replace it with. This is a Boondocker charge tube. These are available separately, and they also come in the Dominator Turbo kit. So this is all aluminum, and we call these pretty bicycle welds because they look like they belong on a high-end bicycle. This is an intake tube that also replaces a plastic part. The biggest reason that we replace this tube, it's not under pressure, and so it doesn't need to be super strong, but it certainly looks a lot nicer. We picked up some volume, and the Dominator Turbo has a bigger inlet, so it needs a bigger tube. But consequently, since the Dominator Turbo fits exactly in the same place as your stock turbo, this will work on your stock turbo also. We just use a little bit different silicone adapter. These kits come with all of the silicone to put the tubes on. There's one other part that we're going to add to this, an upgraded BOV. This is kind of cool. This is an aluminum, all billet aluminum BOV. It has a bronze piston in it. It's got a pretty heavy spring. So the way that this works is boost pressure comes in here. When you shut the throttle valve, you get a vacuum here that actuates a piston, and then it blows off. What that does is it protects the turbo from turbo surge, which can cause the turbo to rock back on the internal shaft, and the turbo can rock back and then come up against the thrust bearing surface, and over time it can wear that thrust surface out. So that's the purpose of a blow-off valve. We're replacing that one because guess what? This one's plastic. So this is the stock one. It's really similar configuration. We do put it in a little bit different way. Instead of bringing boost in from the side and then out the bottom, we actually bring boost in the bottom and out the side because this has a heavier spring in it. These parts aren't going to really gain us performance, but they are going to give us what we need to be able to gain a performance. We're going to be able to really turn the boost up. So you can see that these plastic parts aren't really going to take a whole lot of boost. That's why we're replacing the charge tube with this aluminum charge tube. We can put as much boost to that as we could ever imagine, and it's not going to have a problem. It's not going to fail. One of the things that we really want to talk about is the BOV. There's a lot of guys that are putting BOVs on, and they are a BOV is a blow-off valve. The purpose of the blow-off valve is to, when you close the throttle plate, they actually let boost escape out of the charge system without going back through the turbo. What happens when they go back through the turbo is it actually forces the shaft inside the turbo up against a thrust surface, and after doing that so many times, it could wear the thrust surface out. So the purpose of a BOV is actually to protect the turbo. There is no other real purpose to a BOV. They also produce a really cool, anyways, they do make a pretty cool sound, especially if you vent them to atmosphere. The problem with that is that as this piston opens, when boost pressure has pushed it open, vacuum pressure is holding it open, and then you give it full throttle again, that piston actually has to come closed. So as this BOV is open, it takes a certain amount of time for it to close, and just before it closes, it does have an opportunity to bring air in from the outside. So that's why when they're vented to atmosphere, they have a filter on them, but that filter really needs to be pretty good. In a super sandy environment, that filter really should have an outerwear on it, and then it's still, if you've ever been to the sand dunes, the sand gets everywhere. So unless you're filtered really well. One of the other reasons to not do vent to atmospheric is because all of the charge air that you release has already been compressed, and so when you release it to atmosphere, you really have wasted all of it. So if you actually recirculate it, dump it back into the air intake system, and you can see that there's a port on the stock air intake to receive the boost back in. One of these is for the crankcase vent, and the other one is actually for the recirculating blow-off valve. So what happens is when you let off, it actually dumps that air back into the air intake, and that causes a real slight higher pressure in this air intake, so that when you get back on the throttle, it recovers faster, and it helps the turbo to be more efficient in that recovery. So there's a lot of other theories and I think myths that go around about atmospheric blow-offs causing the turbo to spin more freely without turbo surge, and really I think that stuff's a myth. The less air you blow off, the better your throttle response is, so the stiffer the spring is in them, the better they are. The real reason to have one is to protect that thrust surface inside the turbo. Recirculating is the most efficient way to use a blow-off, and so that's how we're going to hook ours up here today, is recirculating, because that's the most performance and that's what we're after.